Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new SPSM Chat, SPSM Suicide Prevention Social Media. We are going to be talking about the Indigenous Resistance with Shelby Rowe, who's an awesome person, very nice person. So don't get turned off by the title. We're not going to be all militants tonight. But it is the day of the Appropriation Bowl. So what better way than to counter that programming with talking about genocide and all kinds of other fun stuff, suicide. And before we get into our round rectangle, first off, let me make sure that I got this pinned to our Periscope. There we go. And let's hear from you. If you are watching this live and you resisted the temptation to join in the Appropriation Bowl, and this isn't like other SPSM iterations, okay? We don't take breaks for the Appropriation Bowl. We don't do open mics, okay? We have a guest on and it is going to be dynamite. So if you're watching this live, please let us know that you're here. Let us know that you care and join the conversation. Or just sit back and learn a few things. Let's go on to our esteemed round rectangle panel and let's hear from our co-hosts. First co-host would be Marie. So introduce yourself.
Hi, Rudy. Hi, everybody. My name is Marie Shanley, also known as Anxiety. I am a mental health focused streamer on Mixer now, but you can also find me on Twitter and all the other places. My goal is education and raising awareness for mental illness and breaking the stigma through education and by being the bridge between professionals and those living with mental illnesses and connecting them together with information.
By the way, I've been making a concerted effort in 2020 to not yell as much and not have that booming announcer voice. So hopefully I don't sound like too lethargic or something. So
You sound well. We'll keep you on your toes, but you do sound like very chill. I'm getting a very relaxed vibe from you, Rudy, tonight.
yeah, there we go. And next, Joelle.
Hi, I'm Joelle Marie. I am a peer specialist. I am a suicide survivor, which I don't usually say. So I'm still kind of working on that. Sorry. And I'm here to basically, learn about what Shelby has to say.
And we are at our guest tell the whole world, the whole SPSM chat universe. Oh, good. We do have people watching. That is amazing. Okay. The game must have ended early. Who is Shelby Rowe?
Chotma, Sahocha poet Shelby Rowe, Chikasha Saya. My name is Shelby Rowe. I am Chickasaw. I also am the program manager for the Office of Suicide Prevention for the state of Oklahoma. I'm one of the co-founders for the AAS Indigenous Peoples Committee. Have lots of other little roles because I volunteer too much. But quick little disclaimer. My views tonight are just my own. They do not represent my employer. They don't represent my tribe. I am the only person responsible for my nonsense. So there's my disclaimer, and let's get started.
Yes. And so let's see if anyone is joining us on Twitter. I don't think so yet. So don't be shy, okay? So if you're on Mixer, hello, how are you? We got any people on Mixer, Marie?
We have a good 2 viewers. One of them might be me, but they're trickling in. They're still yawning and waking up at 9 p.m. You know the whole thing.
Yes. And hello on Facebook as well and on YouTube, where most people will probably watch this after the fact. If you want to watch it later on, first off, you probably are. That's why that's, that's why you would, I guess.
I agree, Des. That should be a t-shirt.
SPSMchat.com. You can see all past streams, especially when I'm motivated to put it up the same night. So let's get to our first question. Why don't we? We're starting a little early, but hey, let's just mow right through it. That gives us more time to have a conversation. So question number 1: Thank you, Krista, for putting it on screen. I appreciate that. Our trusty live producer. Historically, how has the ostracism, genocide, forced assimilation of the Native American community contributed to the high suicide rates? And before you answer that question, Shelby, how high are the suicide rates?
It depends on what age group you're looking at. So when we're looking at young men, 10 to 34, the rates for Native men, especially rates for Native men who live in reservation-based areas. So Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, the rates are astronomically higher than everyone else. But when you look across the lifespan, the rates for Native Americans across the lifespan is actually lower than that for Caucasians. But we have such a high bubble in our young men. The rates go up exponentially higher. So that is something we need to pay attention to and talk about. And I think that one of the things, something that is happening right now as we're doing this, being the Super Bowl, not against football, not knocking that at all, but it's amazing how cultural appropriation and using someone's skin tone as a costume is still acceptable when it comes to Native people. So to dive into the really light question that you started with, like, how does it not impact? If we break it down and, be nerdy, and let's just start with Thomas Joiner's theory of interpersonal suicidality, we have, perceived burdensomeness and disconnected. There have been systemic efforts, since Columbus, to completely erase people indigenous to this continent. And I don't know a Native person today, we talk, we're descended from the top 5 to 10% who survived. 90 to 95% of those, of those indigenous to this continent were exterminated through lots of different ways, lots of different flavors of genocide. We could spend all hours talking about that, but we won't. But there's really no room in modern US society for Native people. And so trying to make space, because if you are, a young Native person, maybe 4 generations of your family were taken away from the family, raised in a boarding school, which is a really nice term for concentration camp. If you don't know about boarding schools, look them up. We're going to talk about them a little bit at AAS this year. But they were concentration camps. They were slave camps. They were made to assimilate. The policy in the U.S. was, kill the Indian, save the man. And at this point, if we just allow Native people to exist today and respect their culture, we can help turn things around. But if you have a group of people that their religion has been banned, their way of life has been banned, their family structure has been deliberately dismantled. In the 60s, 50s and 60s, they were still doing forcible relocation called the Urban Relocation Project, of moving indigenous people out of their communities into big cities. So yeah, we could go on this forever, but it's like, how does it not impact suicide? Because if you feel, yes, we definitely feel like we're a burden to society. It's amazing how many people in professional settings will be like, well, how much longer do we have to even, do tribes even count anymore? Like, shouldn't you guys just be completely assimilated by now? It's like, I don't know. Why do we still have Christianity? Why does that still exist? Because people have a right to exist. And so making space, and unfortunately, it's impacting our young men the most, who are searching to find their purpose, searching to find where they belong. And it can be really hard because there's not room. I think there's a group, Illuminatives. They're super cool. Follow them if you get a chance, but they're trying to get more accurate stories of indigenous people into media, into movies and TV. because they did a survey and looked, and it was like 0.04% of everyone cast in television and movies, less than 1% of being Indigenous people. So, and if they are in movies and TVs, we're weird caricatures of ourselves. I mean, even, look at Lone Ranger, like, Johnny Depp. I don't know any Native people that wear a dead crow on their head. We're not that caricature. We're modern people that live in the 21st century. We're still here. But sometimes I feel like everyone in society would rather us not be here. So yeah, there's a light answer to the first question. We could go on, but do you guys have anything else to say before I just keep plowing on? Because I could fill the whole hour talking
trust
about
us,
this.
okay? I mean, I'm like an eighth Apache, and I'm not even going to pretend like I'm an expert. You're the expert, so
100%.
we feed off of you, okay? So the more you talk, the less work we have to do.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah. When you think about the assimilation, that Native religions were banned until 1978. Even men wearing long hair was banned from like 1902 to 1978. So trying to rebuild, reconnect, it's happening. And then even, in our field of suicide prevention, something that I hear is, people will say, well, it's a small part of the population, so public health people will be like, well, not sure about it, but that's bullshit, because we make up 2% of the population. We count. Active duty military, I think, is about the same as us, maybe a little less. We certainly as a field care about active duty military. And ironically, Indigenous people serve in the military at higher rates per capita than any other race or ethnicity in our country. So it's just making space. I don't know. Were you guys there a couple years ago when they had the first rally at the Capitol? That's when we had AAS. Yeah. So I went and I was like, okay, yay, this is great. And I was like, where are the Indigenous people? Where's the Indigenous person on stage? And it ended up just really bothering me. And I walked away, and I have like this piece of beadwork of Sitting Bull. And I walked back far enough with perspective that I held it up and took a picture of just completely blocking out the rally. It's like, well, they didn't put any, there are no Native people on stage. So, brought my own, this is my rally. I was just dumbfounded that there was just a complete oversight. They just didn't even think that we mattered. And I reached out and talked to some people. And then last year, I guess they did it again. And again, there were no tribal people on stage. So I reached out again. So we'll see. I try to be nice. I'm more of a, infiltrate, change the system from within kind of person. But enough is enough sometimes, and sometimes you really do have to make some noise.
I agree. And speaking of making noise, shout out to people watching on Facebook. Hey, Desiree. Desiree says, fuck a football. Hi, Shelby. And I can't agree any bit more. She likes that t-shirt. I'm the only person responsible for my nonsense. And hey, Grace, how are you? I appreciate you. Grace says, keep reaching. And let's go to Marie now. Let's put the question back up because I know it's been a while. There we go.
I don't believe that I am qualified in any way, shape, or form to answer this question. So I really have just been taking a back seat and listening to Shelby. I feel like we don't do that enough. So I think that's what I'm going to do this episode. I don't get to shut up very often. So it's actually, this is the better way.
Well, let me ask you, Marie, and maybe you can answer this at the end of the show. Was there anything that Shelby said right now that made you go,
All of it. I mean, I actually studied, hold on, there's like an exact fancy way of putting it, but I graduated with a history degree. Not a lot of people know that. And I specifically studied pre-colonial American history. So there is not necessarily any news there other than me just nodding along and going like, well, that's messed up, and that's how it's going. And I'm happy that there is somebody like Shelby, not just doing her best and in representing, but also like you seem to be educating people very politely and not with kicks and screams, and that's very hard to do, and I admire that.
Thanks. Yeah, sometimes it's easier than other times to do that. But yeah, sometimes we have to just step back. But yeah, if there's any direction you want me to point my rant, I can point it. Like
Well,
there's so
we got
many
3 more
layers.
questions, so
Yeah.
don't worry. We'll cover multiple angles, but I want to make sure we get to Joelle. Joelle, are you with us?
Yes. Sorry. I'm trying to retweet a little bit of what Shelby was saying from my notes after getting kicked off and back on. So, again, I am not an Indigenous person. And so from that perspective, I definitely can't speak to any of this. Like Shelby is definitely the expert. I can speak to ostracism and assimilation in groups, but not generation wise. So I definitely know that ostracism and assimilation is incredibly powerful in diminishing people, in making them feel desperate and erased even without genocide, but definitely contributing to suicide. And the kinds of experiences that Indigenous people have had generationally, like that kind of trauma goes on and on. And I think that a lot of people want to pretend that that's not valid, that trauma cannot be generational, that it cannot affect people over hundreds of years. And it absolutely does. So people need to shut the fuck up about that.
Yes,
Done.
and about most things. Let's be
I
honest.
mean, most things, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
listen to people about their experience, about their people.
Yeah. One thing that I love, so in my tribe, and different tribes call it different things, but we have this thing, called blood memory. And it's like where you remember things from the past. And I love that science finally caught up with tribal wisdom with epigenetics. Epigenetics, super cool. But the trauma that that someone experiences going through life-threatening trauma, it not only changes your DNA, but up to 3 generations after you. And so I've got a friend of mine, and we're like, yeah, I mean, that's 2 grandmas ago. Like to get deep, your egg that formed you was made in your grandmother's womb because your mom was born with all the eggs she was going to have. And your grandmother's egg was formed in her grandmother's womb. And so we are directly impacted by that. And so when you look back, in my family, when I look back, it's like, oh, yeah, that feeling, that gut feeling that you don't belong, that you don't fit in, that a lot of Indigenous people, my family, a lot, in Oklahoma, we were part of the group, moved forced removal to Oklahoma, to Indian country. And when they talk about, oh, well, we moved in Hollywood, you always see the Plains Indians and teepees and stuff. My relatives lived in Mississippi on a plantation. They lived more like Gone with the Wind than what you see on TV, because I think for whatever reason it's more palatable to move people in teepees into reservations than no, we moved a bunch of people off of the best farmland in America just because we didn't like them having it. Some of the tribes in Oklahoma, including mine, it's called the 5 civilized tribes. And they call it civilized because we had intermarried, and we lived, we thought, so to me, the treatment of the 5 civilized tribes is proof that it was not about assimilation at all. It was about extermination because, we had joined Methodist churches and Presbyterian churches, but we were still natives, so they needed to get rid of us. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, talk about all the stuff, but it does get overwhelming. So I know, like for me, to try to stay as an Indigenous woman, working in suicide prevention, I'm a suicide attempt survivor. And, so there is that difference of connecting with culture, which maybe I may be getting ahead to other questions, but that's okay. Of if we ruminate, if we stay too long in the bad, that can get toxic. But if we shift to that reflection and growth, like what now? What are we going to do about this? Then it can be healing. And not only do we heal us, we're healing for future generations, and we're healing past generations. So we think time goes both ways. So taking time to heal, taking time to learn to greet people in our language, because our grandparents weren't allowed to. It was illegal for them to speak their language. They weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to practice any of their traditions and cultures because it was illegal. They would put you in prison, beat you, kill you. So just simple things, like my best friend just got, hello in our tribe and her grandmother's roll number tattooed on her arm. She's like, because my grandma couldn't say hello in Chickasaw. So I have that on me to remind me to always tell people Chotma because she wasn't allowed to. Little things, healing. Like, I went and visited my great grandmother's grave. My relative who was 5 years old. She was an orphan when relocation started for our tribe. She's buried in Oklahoma. And I went to visit her grave last weekend, and I could greet her in Chickasaw. Not very well. I talk like a toddler in Chickasaw, but still, it felt good, to be able to be like, Chotma ipotsi ishia'a, and to greet her. So things like that is healing, and knowing I'm going to teach my kids this and others. And I don't know, it's kind of a cool time for Indigenous people. There was a prophecy, with all the stuff. And again, we could talk another hour about Standing Rock. But some really cool things happened at Standing Rock. One, the movement, I don't think it gets enough press, that whole movement to protect the waterways from the oil was started by a youth group, by a youth leadership group. And some kids said, hey, we want to protect this land because it's sacred. So 5 kids set up their tents, and it grew into this huge movement because everyone said, no, we're going to be there. And I think one of the first times in history, instead of Native people going, oh, here we go again, everyone said, wait, no, we're strong now. And everyone came together. So you had dozens and dozens of tribes that all showed up together. The prophecy was that, when Sitting Bull was alive and all of this was happening, they were putting on reservations, one of the chiefs then said, in 7 generations, the young people, they're going to wake up and they're going to save us. And that was those young people from that tribe. They're like, we're the 7th generation. It's up to us. And I really kind of see some of that waking up. So there's the excitement, but then there's also that fear because we know how things ended at Standing Rock. So it's like, yes, everyone's waking up. People are working together. Intertribal. One bad consequence for the U.S. government of putting everyone in boarding schools. The kids weren't allowed to talk their languages, but they taught each other their languages. Like they wouldn't put you in a room or in classes with anyone who was from your tribe. And so we have young people, that grew up that are now grandparents that speak 5 different tribal languages and can communicate. We had, over 70% of Indigenous people now live in urban areas. And so there's a lot of sharing wisdom. There's a really cool artistic renaissance happening of different artists and being inspired, and people that wouldn't normally have ever crossed paths. But because of forced removal, because of that shared trauma, groups that were historically enemies and had nothing in common, people that were agrarian farmers like my tribe, actually partnering and making friends with the nomadic plains tribes that never happened back then. But now we all live in the same community and we're sticking up for each other. Like right now, our tribes are in a battle with our state's governor, where in the past we all would have fought separately, but everyone's joined together now. I think 35 of our 39 tribes that were moved to Oklahoma are all standing together, which is inspiring. But then, if we all get smacked down together, that's going to be a big shared loss.
Okay, thank you so much, Shelby, for teaching us so much. And you know what? I know we're running behind on time, but if this show is just an hour of Shelby talking, I'm okay with that. So before we get into our next question, though, so let's what is it with this one? Let's give a shout out to Dr. Monica TD, who says in response to question number 1, the role and burden of historical trauma is greatly underestimated. Historical trauma contributes to the high suicide rate in Native communities. Hashtag SPSM. Shout out also to Marcy Timmerman, who's lurking from Kentucky. Let's see comments on Facebook. Great comments, Desiree. Y'all best ask Shelby about her beads. That's in the self-promotional section at the end, Desiree, as you should know, former guest on SPSM Chat. Okay, so question number 2. Let's throw that up. What are some differences between cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation, and why is the former harmful? Spoiler alert, it's harmful. Let's just get it out of the way, Shelby. If you are celebrating the Chiefs, the football team, by wearing a Native American headdress, are you a piece of shit?
Oh. You're at least ignorant, not self-aware.
How nice of you to say that.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
Yeah. So a headdress that a chief wore, each feather was like something that they earned. It was an act of honor, bravery. So think about it like a military uniform that's got all the little ribbons, Purple Heart. Like, we don't dress up and everyone like wear their sexy Purple Heart costume at Halloween or other things. Dressing up and doing that kind of makes a mockery of what someone would have to do to earn enough eagle feathers to have a headdress. Those are like a big honor. And so wearing things that were ceremonial for fun, for costumes, is disrespectful at best. I mean, it's just making a mockery. Think about the same of how you would respond if you saw someone in blackface, or you've had all kinds of stuff with politicians of blackface and brownface. I know Justin Trudeau just got in trouble for stuff, and it just blows my mind that nobody cares about doing red face. The term Redskins was super derogatory, and that was, people got money, a bounty. Like California, at least their governor had the balls to admit, like, hey, we're really sorry, we're gonna apologize for the genocide. But people were paid for the Redskins, so you would get paid for each human being that you killed, and the proof that you killed them was taking some of their skin and turning it in. And sometimes it was taking sex organs. It was really awful and crude, and people were butchered and mutilated, and yet everyone celebrates the Redskins. Think of any other derogatory term for a racial group and you would never have a sports team. But we're just considered to not even be around anymore, that we don't exist anymore. So yeah, think about, oh, is this something, like the Boy Scouts have like Order of the Arrow or whatever. And it always just blows my mind, because at the time that they were teaching kids, oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to give you Indian names and we're going to parade around in costumes, which was ceremonial regalia. our own Indigenous children were not allowed to wear any ceremonial clothing. Like, there were tribes that were starved out if they didn't turn in all of their regalia. Like, you're not going to get food unless you give all this stuff up. You can't speak your language. We're taking away your names. And so, yeah, if you're not Native and you're going to a party and everyone's giving each other Indian names, fuck you. It's just really inappropriate. And I'll go back to having composure. But it just, like, why do you do this? Why are you making a mockery of people that are here, people that are educated, living in communities with everyone else, and being treated as if they don't exist anymore, that it's just a stereotype caricature?
Now, Shelby, let me challenge you. I have Native friends who say I have no problem with the term redskin, or I have no problem with the chiefs, and that people get offended too easily. We all should be able to laugh at ourselves. What say you to that?
I say, more power to them. At the beginning, I gave my disclaimer. Like, I in no way think that I speak for all Native people. We're really diverse. Like, there are 573 federally recognized tribes. There's a lot more that don't have federal recognition. Our cultures are very different. So for that, and I have friends that they tailgated every Chiefs game, and they're Native, and I like, that's fine, So you guys just get the world according to Shelby for this. So it's like, I'm not going to judge them for not being bothered by it. I mean, it's complicated because we all live in today's society too. I think more my role as a suicide prevention professional, when I see how it further marginalizes our young people, especially our young boys, it's not cool. I mean, we wouldn't think if we had sports teams that made mockeries of other ethnicities. Weirdly, I think when I think about the marginalization and, society deliberately trying to keep you from existing, I think that what happens, how society treats the trans community is probably the closest, of trying to make sure that, to do anything to make sure they don't exist. So I have a real heart for our my trans brothers and sisters and family that they're facing that the world doesn't want them to exist. And that's painful for anyone and everyone. So I think we can all work together to make that better. But yeah, Rudy, I mean, it is complicated. And different. And I guess one on the other side of the question, like, what's appropriate? There's lots of really talented Indigenous artists. There's clothes. There's lots of things that are like Native themed that are fine. So I think for me, a rule of thumb is like, is this something that someone would have worn to a ceremony? Then I probably shouldn't wear it to Coachella. Like, different things of if this is just fashion, or is this something that's ceremonial? Because there's lots of things behind me. I've got a painting by a buddy of mine, Brent Learned. Have other stuff. Won't give you a tour of all my art, but there's lots of really talented artists. There's great food. If you're in Denver, go to Chakabe. So you can support and encourage our culture without making a mockery of it. And also, if a good rule of thumb for me is, if a Native person gives you something, you better wear it. If they gift you something,
yes,
yeah, you have every right to wear it.
No, absolutely. Marie, Joelle, do you have anything to say, either one of you?
The piece of shit comment, I probably could just I know it struck me because I was like, whoa, that's language. But like, I don't know that there's another way to put that. I think that was very elegantly put and very much summarized the anger. So I have not had, I am Russian. I have not had my culture particularly. What I can relate to is not necessarily, not even necessarily, not at all Shelby's experience, because I'm not going to pretend to be that person. But I will say I have felt the sting of, you are distilling my culture into like 2 sentences, and that is hurtful and offensive. And to take that and multiply that by generations and generations of people, that is something that, again, all we can do is just respectfully listen. So if I seem like I'm like just taking it in, that's literally what I'm doing. I'm trying to, and then just like gassing Shelby up as much as I can. Like, tell me about that. Say, be mad if you need to be mad, because you are very, again, I'll say it again, incredibly respectful, and thank you.
What say you, Joelle? I see you active on the Facebook comments.
Well, I think that I don't want to take away from kind of like Shelby's platform, basically. So I think some of the things that I'm saying are maybe appropriate for follow-up. But
Okay.
I guess I will say that, I have been involved in research projects that, have done even just the 3-generation trauma follow-up that have, sorry, puppy, that started over 30 years ago, still going, started with just 2 generations and started seeing physical changes from the 1st generation to the 2nd generation with extreme trauma. Now they're on the 3rd generation. And there are physical changes. There's life-limiting physical issues that are coming up consistently over all subjects. But again, as I said, it's, needing to have substantiated proof, which is like, what is that against actual experience for a group of people? Sorry, puppy. Saying what is happening to them and their people in their community, their own lived experience, saying over and over, these things are happening, these things are true for many of us. But then like decades and decades and decades later, it's not true until you have numbers. Like numbers on black and white paper. And it's bullshit. It's bullshit. It costs lives.
Yeah, and
Okay.
there's a reason why they don't want it down on paper.
Yeah.
They would rather just erase it. When I was going to college and I was trying to avoid having to dissect animals, so I took an environmental biology class. And so we were learning about environmental things, and we were doing different issues. So the thing that I ended up researching was, at the Four Corners area, where there were lots of tribes, they did a lot of uranium mining. And with the tribes, the deal, they're like, okay, well, if you let us mine, we're going to build you community buildings and roads and build you, we'll build playgrounds and infrastructure, and it'll be great. And so they started doing that, but they built the people's buildings out of the stuff that came out of the uranium mines. So they built them radioactive buildings and everything. So surprise, surprise, infant mortality went up, cancer rates went way up. And so like this was in the mid 90s. And at the end of the class, they're like, okay, so if you want, write a letter and see, you've spent a lot of time researching. So I write my letter to the EPA and, here's all the research. And my question at the end was just like, I just want to know an estimated time for when cleanup will start. I know there's a lot of stuff. When are you planning to clean this up? This happened. That this caused these issues. And the letter I got back literally said, well, this only affects sub-Americans. And so it's not a priority. And right now there's no cleanup scheduled. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You just basically called Native people sub-Americans. And yeah, we know that we've exposed them to radiation. We know we're killing them, but yeah, that doesn't affect the general public. And I think what happens is what's in the common interest is a nice way of hiding a lot of really shitty things that they've done to Native people, that it was in the common interest. I did look it back up, and I saw that they have been working on cleanup of that site. They started in 2008. But still, like, this was in the 80s. My grandmother would be so mad if she knew that I went to Indian Health Services now. Like, when I was a kid, she was like, never carry your Indian card on you, because if something happens, they'll take you to the Indian hospital and you'll die. And I was like, this woman is crazy and paranoid. But I got older and I realized that in the 70s, and they got caught, but in the 70s, IHS, it was government policy to sterilize Native women. And when it was all said and done, so they sterilized about 20 to 25% of all Indigenous women. That's in my lifetime. That's active genocide of making sure that people didn't reproduce. So yeah, I mean, I guess could go on and on schooling on trauma, but yeah, so there's the historical trauma. Then for our children, we have high ACEs scores, because amazingly, if your parents and your grandparents were raised in a school where they were beaten horrifically, starved, sexually assaulted, they love their kids. They don't know how to parent. And a lot of them turn to addiction, because if I had that childhood, I would turn to addiction also. So our kids have high ACEs scores. And it's not just PTSD for our people. As one of my friends said, it's ongoing traumatic stress disorder. It's not post. It hasn't stopped yet. So it's like, if people would just let us be, let us exist. I went to a professional meeting, and, my tribe honored me one year. And my tribe, if you look them up, we are really bougie. We are bougie natives. We own lots of businesses. We're fancy Indians. And I was honored by my tribe as like Woman of the Year in 2016. And I'm at a conference. One of my professional colleagues goes, "Oh, can I introduce you as an Indian princess?" I was like, no, you cannot. Like, I'm not. That actually is like, there are young people, it's kind of like tribal ambassadors. They do like this pageant to compete to do that. But it's like, why would you diminish my professional credentials? I mean, it was at a conference, I was getting ready to give a keynote. Why would you introduce me as someone's Indian princess? But it happens all the time.
Okay, so let's get on to question number 3, and let's try to get this one out of the way shortly, because like the fourth question is the real money. So really quickly, shout outs to Megan, Peter, Monica on Twitter. I appreciate your comments. Thank you for participating in the chat. That is very, very important. Thank you again to Desiree and Grace holding it down in the Facebook comments. I appreciate you as well. Question number 3, and that is, what are things we can do to be visible? That's the key word. Allies, as opposed to being performative, which would mean fake allies.
Yeah.
Shelly?
So one, you guys, so doing things like this, of like, just give the microphone. One thing that I notice, a lot of people get that white savior complex. Like, yes, there are some issues happening in Indian country, but when you swoop in, thinking, well, we're going to swoop in and save you, that's really condescending and insulting. But if you show up and be like, hey, tell me about your community, do you need help? Tell me, is there anything that we can do? And listen. Just listen to them. Don't come in and go, well, I see you got a real problem here and we're going to fix it. Listen, and if their solution doesn't fit in your worldview, so what? Maybe your solution doesn't fit for them either. So listen. I will give kind of a shameless plug. Last year I pulled aside Colleen with AAS and Jonathan Singer and others. I was like, hey, I'm concerned that there just is not a presence. Like, okay, well, what do you want? And so I started listing what we wanted. And my mom taught me you weren't allowed to complain unless you were willing to be part of the solution. So that's made a lot of extra work for me this year. But they said, well, okay, we want to do things. And you'll see this year, we're not just, they said, well, we're going to do a land acknowledgement. It's the 53rd year of the conference, I think, and they've never acknowledged tribal people. And we said, okay, well, if you're going to do it for the first time, let's do it right. Let's make a bigger deal out of it. But before, so like we planned, there's going to be a grand entry. It's going to be really cool. But we talked to them. We were like, okay, so if you're going to do this, we need your commitment that you're at least going to do, like, you don't have to do a grand entry every year. That's a lot of work for us and for you guys. But if you're going to continue to keep us up there, we've got a pre-conference. If you're going to keep doing land acknowledgements, keep doing things, we'll do this. But if you do this 1 year, it's like, don't make us show and tell. Like, actually give us seats at the table, and then listen. When we sit down to talk, actually listen. So I think in any community that you're in, going, okay, if you notice that Native people are conspicuously absent from the table when we're talking about suicide prevention, go find them. Go find who they are and bring them to your table and listen. I mean, I think that would be the best way of being an ally, is just listen. Abigail Echohawk, who is my new professional crush, she runs the Urban Indigenous Health Institute. Major badass. And one person's like, we're not your problem to solve. We have your answers to discover. So don't approach our communities as if we're a problem to solve. Don't collect data as if you're trying to document our problems. Looking to see, instead go, why are we still alive? What is it? We're an extremely resilient people to still be here, to have any semblance of cultural identity after the years and years and years of genocide and cultural erasure, that we are still here, that we do still have cultural identity. Yeah, we've got some wounds and scars along the way. Certainly don't want to minimize that, but research our resilience and strength, not what's wrong with us.
Any inputs, Marie or Joelle?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Actually, yeah, so I guess I have kind of a more specific question about how to be like an ally in a way that's not like damaging or harmful or kind of overstepping. So, we talked about kind of stuff specifically. I'm sorry. It's the puppy. She hears Rudy in the other room. So stuff like, people kind of culturally appropriating, and I do think it's my place to call that out, but I think it's a fine line, and I'm wondering, like, when is that harmful, and is that actually harmful all the time for me to do? Is it my place? Like, is that a bad thing to do? Like, and I know you only speak for you, but I want to know if I'm doing a jackass thing in general, and I know you can only speak for you.
Yeah, I can only speak for me, but I will say there's a lot of Native people who don't look Native. Mm-hmm. So be careful when you're calling someone out. I mean, because I've got a good friend that, like red hair, blue eyes. If you look on Card and Blood Quantum, which is a whole other bullshit thing, but like, she'd be more Native than me on that. But no one, she's had people give her shit for like having her hair braided and wearing skirts, and it's like, but that's my cultural identity. Like, that's who I am. Like, don't say that I'm appropriating culture just because I don't fit the stereotype.
Well, I think
so I say one of like making sure, but then
Sorry.
otherwise to be like, yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, I usually try to be like, hey, you know, that's really, I try to use it as a teachable moment, but feel free to call them out.
It's more like when things are jokes that seem like making fun of, and it's you know, like I know it is a fine line, and it's you take a risk when you're like, is that okay? And I am aware of that. Like I have things going on with me that people really like to call me out when I make comments, and it's like, do you actually know? No, you don't know that that's not going on with me. But and I know that that is something to be aware of. But
right, I mean, yeah, calling us lazy alcoholics and stuff. One, I love some like recent research that came out that we actually have a higher sobriety rate than others. Like more Native people don't drink than other ethnicities. So I mean, it's just something to. It's just easier to look down on us. So like some of those stereotypes.
I'm sorry.
To not. No, that's good. But yeah, to not do that. But yeah, no, feel free to call people out when they're being racist because it's the right thing to do. I know one of my friends had posted a meme that I loved that for like when I really tried to be quiet, but my ancestors wouldn't let me.
Okay, so Marie, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so there was, and I'm going to try to be brief in asking this, but I was listening to a podcast and it was discussing racism in the, white people against the African American community. And something that was noted was the interviewee was going around and saying, like, what can we as white people do to better stop racism? And somebody in the community spoke up, and she was like, this is not my problem to solve. You being racist is your issue and your community's issue. I am just existing, and you have decided to discriminate against me. That's not my problem to solve. And I thought that was a very powerful and interesting point. I was just wondering, do you feel like that at all applies to you? Does that resonate with you as well? Like, really, racism against your people is not your issue to solve.
Yeah, I mean, if other people like, I'm not here to absolve. I've got a friend of mine who he looks very Native, and he was like, "Do you ever have people come up to you and just like apologize? Like I want to apologize on behalf of all white people." So he just like made up a goofy little ritual, to like forgive them. But it's not up to us. I don't want to make you feel guilty, and I certainly am not the one to absolve your guilt. So if you're noticing and feeling uncomfortable that you've been racist, just treat us like normal human beings. Treat us as if, hey, how would you like, trying to defend our humanity gets annoying, at the very least. Like, I don't know how to tell you how to treat me like a human being. So go figure that out on your own and come back.
So, question number 4, and this is the meat of the bone. This is why we're all here, and that would be, I'm starting to yell again. I'm sorry. I'm bad with New Year's resolutions. Question number 4, how can embracing Indigenous culture be a key to reducing suicide risk for us all? And I know that's a key tenet of your upcoming TED Talk at the American Association of Suicidology conference. So maybe you don't want to spill all the beans, but please share what you can.
So I won't spill all the beans, but I will give a few. So one big thing, I mentioned before, our trans brothers and sisters. So in Indigenous cultures, in our religion, that was considered horrible, we believe that everyone was sacred. Everyone was sacred. Everyone was a gift. If you were different than the norm, you were a gift. You were sacred. You were special. We had, in many of our tribes, there were multiple spaces for gender. And so think if everyone just said, you know what, we're going to adopt that, how much, the risk factors that we put, the social, the ostracizing, bullying, shunning, killing and real abuse, that no Native family, traditional Native family. Now we're real assimilated because you guys have worked real hard to teach us to hate people. But they would have never kicked out their children for not fitting in the binary male and female. They'd be like, oh, you're a gift. Like, you're special. There's something special about you. You're a gift to our people. If we did that, embrace that, like, that would help so many people. And then the communal families. So there's lots of aunties, uncles. So they're quick. If everyone, because we knew then, in families, you're going to have struggle and strife. In a nuclear family with a mom, dad, and kids, that can break down. But if you see it as a communal where you have 10 aunties and uncles and cousins, and everyone is looking after each other as if you were their own children, yes, that can get dysfunctional, but it provides that strong connectedness, a strong sense of purpose. If you're living of, what am I doing today to honor my ancestors? And what am I doing to be a good ancestor? Because it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, where you're from, you or your ancestors' wildest dreams come true. Think about all the cool stuff that you get to do. It's like, what are you doing to honor that, to honor them? And what are you doing to make the world a better place for your descendants? So they'll look back and know that you made the world better for them. Those are like some Native tenets, and we'll get into more. I won't give away all of my secrets.
Damn it.
But these are things, that if we embrace those as a culture, even just as suicidologists, that, hey, everyone deserves to exist. Everyone is sacred just for being who you are. You don't have to earn anything. Think of how many different groups those risk factors would drop for.
So let's kind of combine everything right now. So let's go to final thoughts, and we'll end with you, Shelby. But did Marie or Joelle, anyone want to say? I know Marie. Hopefully you're feeling okay. How are you doing over there, Marie?
Not great. Not great. Lots of blankets, and I feel like I have a fever coming on, so not great. But I love you all, and I appreciate everybody here, and I am honored to have had this little learning experience. So thank you again, Shelby.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join us. I know it was a close call with your internet and
It's
everything.
a stupid internet, and now this. Yeah, so don't worry about me. Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. Thank you. We'll see you on Mixer. Okay, Joelle, any final thoughts?
I just sorry, my brain is not okay. I guess assimilating people into another culture, into who they are not, is always going to be harmful, individually and in a larger sense to a whole people. Also, like in terms of celebrating and supporting a culture, always, buying and supporting their artists, their makers, their creators, their educators is, I feel like, always a way to support a culture, and giving them the mic, basically, even though I'm talking right now.
Do you want to go to a sweat lodge with me, Joelle?
Is that something you want? We could talk about it if you would like me to do that.
I have a friend who's Inca that'll hook us up. So there we go. Hey, Shelby, final thoughts. Do you have a sweat lodge going on?
And that would be like, thanks for jumping to stereotypes.
Were you prepared for that?
I wasn't like that, in the left field. So not all tribes sweat. Not everyone does that. Yeah. And for some, it's like, oh yeah, let's do this. And it's like a wellness thing. And then for other people, it's more sacred. But since you are Apache, and if your people do that, go do that.
Yeah. And
as I said, my people were like bougie natives. Like we, yes. I mean, there are some people in my tribe that do that, but I don't.
But let me
But
let me be clear, Shelby.
yeah.
Whenever I have sweated, it has always been serious about it. I know I take so
Yeah.
little seriously, but it is a legit sweat lodge. It's not like total like bootleg or anything like that. So
Yeah, I mean,
just to
it
be
can be a
clear.
really beautiful, powerful experience. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Final
my
thoughts,
response, like,
Shelby.
he's never introduced this to me before and said, "Would you like to do this with me?" I just want to be clear.
So we're just
Final
opening
thoughts,
up all
Shelby.
kinds of
Oh
opportunities
yeah.
for you. Thank you. I kind of feel a little guilty that I just rambled the whole time, but thank you
No, it's
for
great.
letting
Thank you very
me
much.
talk and ramble. And again, like, we could talk all day about these issues. So feel free. I'm not good at multitasking. So for people that are in the Facebook group or on Twitter, I will do my best to respond later after this because I can't talk and do that at the same time because I'm old. But thanks so much for having me. And thanks for just caring about this conversation to start with. And I'm hoping that at AAS that we get a good response. I'm real curious to see how the group in general is going to respond to some of these deeper conversations.
So, is there any other way we can connect with you?
You can connect with me on Facebook. You can connect with me on Twitter. I'm really not super active on Twitter. On Instagram, I have my personal Instagram, and then I have bead art by Shelby because that's one of the things that I do is bead art. So check it out. I started doing that to connect more with my culture, and lo and behold, I'm good at it. I actually have a piece now that's at the Smithsonian, so I can't wait to get to go see it. So check out the beadwork that I do. It's my mindfulness and meditation. It's like the best therapy for my PTSD I ever found. But yeah, come and connect with me. And at AAS, if you see me, I promise I'm not a snob. I'm just socially awkward. It's like I'll assume that you
Yay.
don't want to talk to me until you come up and talk to me. So please don't think I'm a snob. I'm just more socially awkward than most people think.
I have one more
But
question. So you're doing a keynote at AAS?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I thought so. Are you also doing
Yeah.
any other panels or anything?
I'm doing a couple things. I'm part of the facilitating team. We're doing a pre-conference for suicide prevention in Indian country. So
Okay.
anyone who works, you can be an ally, but if you work in suicide prevention serving Indigenous peoples, you're invited to come and join us that day. And then doing a keynote. I'm doing a panel discussion on working with your states. My team, me and some of my employees, and then the team from the state of Minnesota in suicide prevention are going to co-host that. And then I'm doing one on care transitions with the Zero Suicide folks.
Awesome.
So doing a little bit of
thank you,
everything.
Shelby.
Great.
Thank you, Shelby. I'm so glad you mentioned the bead art too. Please
Yeah.
go check that out.
We can't disappoint Des. She wanted us
Yes,
to
of
bring it up.
course. We love you so much, Shelby. And it's gonna be so exciting to see you again. And of course, if you're ever in our area in Southern California, let us know as well. Love to
Yeah.
connect. And so that's going to do it for SPSM Chat. I'm so glad. Thank you everyone for joining us, especially those who bypassed the appropriation bowl, even though that is so tempting because it's a unofficial American holiday. So the people who did not give in to that peer pressure and joined us, I appreciate you. If you're watching this later on the week, later on the month, later on the year, that's totally fine as well. You're probably watching this on spsmchat.com or YouTube, so feel free to still leave comments, whether it be on our WordPress blog or on the YouTube channel. We love connecting with you even long after the shows are over. That's going to do it again. Next week, who's our guest, Marie, next week?
Next week, I won't be muted. Next week, we have an incredible guest, Dr. Kelly Dunlap. She specializes in representation in media. And specifically, her niche is representation of mental illness in video games and how it's been done rather poorly, as most of us know. So that's who we're going to have.
I'm going to ask her to talk
Yes.
about Psychonauts.
She's probably going to tell you all about Psychonauts.
Yeah,
She'll know before I
we
do.
might stream our first game next Sunday. Just saying.
Just stream it before the show. It's awesome.
No, there we go. We might just put it up on screen. We never know. Like, I don't want to give too much away. We're not going to do that, by the way. We're not sophisticated enough for that. Okay, so
You have the
that's going to do it.
technology. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you only knew. That's going to do it. Thank you again, Shelby Rowe. She's amazing. If you're going to be at the AAS conference and you see one keynote, see Joelle's. But if you're going to see another one, see Shelby's. So thank you all. I appreciate you. See you again next Sunday. That's going to do it. Until next Sunday. Hold your piggies close.